All right, we are day 8, stay at home work. So we want to go over our questions from day 6 and day 7, along with the vocabulary that went with that. So that's where we're going to start. So let's start with question 1. It says, how does Brian's fear that the plane will shift and trap him inside affect him? That is our end in mind question, okay? That is our big one. So how it affects him is that on page 166, it affects him by that he stops and thinks before he gets in, because he is scared. And he's not going to be impulsive with just saying, I'm going to be all right, let's go. No, he's stopping and he's really thinking about, oh man, not sure if I can do this or not. But he stops and thinks before he gets in. So my restate would be, Brian's fear that the plane will shift and trap him inside affects him by he stops and thinks before he just jumps into the plane. My evidence is on page 166, where it says, the thing had been up now for 2 days, plus a bit, and he had been hammering and climbing on it, and it hadn't gone back down. It seemed pretty solid. So when he thought about it, he realized that, you know what, I've been all over this plane. I've been climbing on it. I've been taking my hatchet and cutting big pieces off. So it's pretty stable, so I should be okay. That's what we're looking for. That's our end in mind question. So we kind of want to make sure that we have a pretty good grasp on that. Our number 2, why is it difficult to get the survival pack out of the plane? If we go over to page 169, the second paragraph, so I would say, restate, it is difficult to get the survival pack out of the plane because the pack is larger than the hole that Brian cut. I know this because on page 169, paragraph 2, it says he pulled and jerked and still it wouldn't fit. So that's telling me that it's larger than the hole he's cut. And at last he had to change the shape of it, rearranging what was inside by pushing and pulling at the sides until he had narrowed it and made it longer. So he had to reshape the bag. He had to reshape the things that was in it to elongate it. Instead of just trying to pull it out in a big wad, he's made it to where it's more lengthwise. So that's what he had to do. Number 3, how does Brian get the survival pack back to the shelter? We're going to look at that same page, that 169, but a little bit lower in our book. Let's look at paragraph 3 right below that. So restate would be, Brian gets the survival pack back to the shelter by putting the bag on the raft and tying it. My evidence is on page 169, paragraph 3. He finally got the bag out and tied on top of the raft. It was nearly dark. When I bump on down to paragraph 4, because it needs to be complete, it says, with the added weight of the bag, which seemed to get heavier by the foot. So that is more evidence that the bag is on the raft. And so we want to kind of keep it there, okay? We want to add that extra little piece there to make it complete. Number 4, that is what I call a spiral back question to week 1. No, actually it's week 2. I said week 1 yesterday, but I thought about that. Week 1 was character traits. Week 2 is theme of perseverance. But question 4 says, how is the retrieval of the survival pack an example of the theme of perseverance? And we talked about how perseverance is where you don't give up, even when things get difficult. So my restate would be that the retrieval of the survival pack is a great example of perseverance by Brian does not give up until he gets that survival pack to his shelter. Now, my evidence would be on page 170, where it says, he began the long drag. He couldn't lift it. Back down to the shoreline to his shelter. 2 hours, almost 3. He dragged and stumbled in the dark, brushing the mosquitoes away, sometimes on his feet, more often on his knees, finally to drop across the bag and to sleep when he made the sand in front of the doorway. That passage there is showing that perseverance of not giving up. He wanted to get the bag to his shelter where he knew that it was safe. And even though he was exhausted from a full day in the lake, doing manual labor, disassembling the plane, pulling back all of the aluminum, saving it for further use, diving repeatedly into the plane, pulling and pulling and pulling and getting out that survival pack, he didn't stop. You know, he got it on top of the raft. 2 hours later, he makes it to the edge of the lake, and then another 2 to 3 hours, and he's just pulling and pulling and working to get it up. He didn't give up. He could have easily said, I'm just too tired. I'll come back and get this tomorrow. But he wanted to make sure that it was safe. All that work, he wanted to make sure it was where it needed to be with him. I mean, I would have been just like him. I wouldn't have left it for the world. All the trouble he went through and the thought of what could be in it that I could use, that I might need, would have driven me also to get it back to the cave. Now, let's look at your vocabulary, because I did ask you to do those also. Remember, this is what it's going to look like on your test. Miss Montoya said, we were blank noisy in class today. Your blank would be unduly. Okay, we were unduly loud. Harry peered through the blank window and tried to see who was knocking at the door. He peered through the murky window. That tells me somebody needs to get some Windex and clean some windows. 3, Carol had an ability to see when someone is lying. Carol had an instinctive ability to tell when someone is lying. Your parents know that too. And 4, Mom caught my brother blank in the refrigerator last night looking for the last piece of fried chicken. Well, Mom caught the brother. And I don't know about you all right now, but all my kids and probably all you're wanting to do is play video games and eat. Rummaging through the kitchen at all hours of the night. So that's what's happening here with this young man, rummaging. Now, we have checked our work, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm flipping over to my day 4. I'd like you to do the same thing. We are super quickly coming to an end of this book, and I know that for the most part, you guys have truly enjoyed this book. I'm going to make myself some notes here. So we've checked our questions. And we are going to begin day 4. And hopefully by beginning day 4, that means we will get to doing all 4 questions in your journal. So that's the goal for today. We'll see how that goes. All right. So let's take our book up. We are on chapter 19, page 171. That's where we are going to be today. 171. Treasure. Unbelievable riches. He could not believe the contents of the survival pack. Well, the night before, he was so numb with exhaustion, he couldn't do anything but sleep. All day in the water had tired him so much that in the end, he had fallen asleep sitting against his shelter wall. oblivious even to the mosquitoes and to the night, to anything. But with false gray dawn, he had awakened instantly and began to dig in the pack to find amazing, wonderful things. Well, there was a sleeping bag, which he hung to dry over his shelter roof on the outside, and a foam sleeping pad, an aluminum cook set with 4 little pots and 2 frying pans. It actually even had a fork and knife and a spoon. A waterproof container with matches and 2 small butane lighters. A sheath knife with a compass in the handle, as if a compass would help him, he thought, smiling. A first aid kit with bandages and tubes of antiseptic paste and small scissors. A cap that said Cessna across the front in large letters. Why a cap, he wondered. It was adjustable, and he put it on immediately. A fishing kit with 4 coils of line, a dozen small lures, and hooks and sinkers. Incredible wealth. It was like all the holidays in the world, all the birthdays there were. And he sat in the sun by the doorway where he had dropped the night before and pulled the presents, as he thought of them, out one at a time to examine them, to turn them in the light, touch them and feel them with his hands and eyes. Something that at first puzzled him. He pulled out what seemed to be the broken off bulky stock of a rifle, and he was going to put it aside, thinking it might be for something else in the pack, when he shook it and it rattled. After working at it a moment, he found the butt of the stock came off, and inside there was a barrel and magazine and action assembly with a clip and a full box of 50 shells. It was a .22 survival rifle. Well, he had seen one once in the sporting goods store where he went for bike parts, and the barrel screwed into the stock. He had never owned a rifle, never fired one, but had seen them on television, of course, and after a few moments he figured out how to put it together by screwing the action into the stock, how to load it, and put the clip full of bullets into the action. It was a strange feeling, holding the rifle. It somehow removed him from everything around him. Without the rifle, he had to fit in, to be part of it all, to understand it and use it. The woods, all of it. With the rifle, suddenly he didn't have to know, did not have to be afraid or understand. He didn't have to get close to a full bird to kill it. Didn't have to know how it would stand if he didn't look at it and moved off to the side. The rifle changed him. The minute he picked it up, and he wasn't sure he liked the change very much, he set it aside, leaning it carefully against the wall. He could deal with that later. Well, the fire was out, and he used a butane lighter and a piece of birch bark with small twigs to get another one started, marveling at how easy it was, but feeling again that the lighter somehow removed him from where he was, what he had to know. With a ready flame, he didn't have to know how to make a spark nest or how to feed the new flames to make them grow. As with the rifle, he wasn't sure he liked the change. So we want to think about our end in mind of cause and effect. So what is the effect on Brian after he finds this rifle and the lighter in the survival pack? How does he feel about that? Well, these 2 items really change Brian with these tools. With these 2 tools alone, a rifle and a lighter, it makes getting food and fire extremely easy. And it removes him from being what he calls a person of nature. So he's not really having to be in tune with what's around him. If he wants a full bird, he can just spot one and shoot it. He doesn't have to think about all of the things that he needs to do to get close enough to actually kill one to eat it. It's just like, I'm a good, however far 22 will shoot, and he's able to get it. When he's thinking about fire, it changes him from nature, because now he's not taking that axe and a piece of obsidian and making the sparks go. He's just a click of a lighter, and he's got it. So he's not really sure how he feels about that. I mean, my gut would say, I'd be like, yeah, all right, okay, this is a whole lot easier. I'm glad for that. But the author is kind of alluding to the fact that Brian is a little unsure. And that's where we need to go with our answer. Really quickly, I'd like you to, let's break those questions down. Always when we get to day 4, it always goes quicker, if you remember correctly. So, day 4. Which of the following is the best definition for surge? On page 181. Anytime that they give us a page number, we know we're going to circle that. And I'm automatically going to underline surge. We know we're choosing 1 because it only asks for 1. Keep in mind that in 7th grade, especially science class, there will be times where you will be asked to choose 2. You might be asked to choose 3. And even when we did our practice, I think it was like a pilot K-Prep online, some of those reading questions ask for more than 1 answer. So it's always good to keep writing that choose 1, choose 2, just to kind of keep your mind in the game. Then it says explain your answer. This type of question, if you remember correctly, on a test is worth 30 points. So you get 10 for the multiple choice. You get an additional 20 for your explanation of why you chose what you chose. Number 2, why is Brian glad to find soap in the survival pack? So it's just a basic tell why Brian is glad to find soap in survival pack. Another spoiler alert. I want you to explain how the arrival of the plane affects Brian. So a plane shows up. And so the cause is a plane shows up. How does that affect Brian in today's reading? And last but not least, tell what Brian's response to the pilot tells you about Brian. We know that our number 3, might as well circle it, guys. That's a big one. It's automatically going to be our question that's going to show up on the test. Just simply because it is our end in mind question. Okay, so we want to make sure that we do that one. All right, now let's go back to the reading. I'm going to sit for a little bit. The bottom of 173. Up and down, he thought. The pack was wonderful, but it gave him up and down feelings. With the fire going and sending up black smoke and a steady roar from a pitch-smelling chunk he put on, he turned once more to the pack, rummaging through the food packets. He hadn't brought them out yet because he wanted to save them until last. Glory in them. So he came up with a small electronic device completely encased in a plastic bag. At first, he thought it was a radio or cassette player. And he had a surge of hope because he missed music, missed sounds, he missed hearing another voice. But when he opened the plastic and took the thing out and turned it over, he could see that it wasn't a receiver at all. There was a coil of wire held together on the side by tape, and it sprung into a 3-foot-long antenna when he took the tape off. No speaker, no lights, just a small switch at the top. And on the bottom, he finally found, in small print, emergency transmitter. That was it. Well, he turned the switch back and forth a few times, but nothing happened. He couldn't even hear static. So, as with the rifle, he set it against the wall and went back to the bag. It was probably ruined in the crash, he thought. 2 bars of soap. Well, he had bathed regularly in the lake, but not with soap. And he thought how wonderful it would be to wash his hair. Thick with grime and smoked dirt, frizzled by wind and sun, matted with fish and full-bird grease. His hair had grown and stuck and tangled and grown until it was a clumped mess on his head. He could use the scissors from the first aid kit to cut it off, then wash it with soap. And then finally, the food. That's what I'd be looking for. It was all freeze-dried and in such quantity that he thought, with this, I could live forever. Package after package he took out. Beef dinners with potatoes, cheese and noodle dinners, chicken dinners, egg and potato breakfasts, fruit mixes, drink mixes, dessert mixes, more dinners and breakfasts than he could count easily. Dozens and dozens of them, all packed in waterproof bags, all in different shapes. And when he had them all out and laid against the wall in stacks, he couldn't stand it, and he went through them again. If I'm careful, he thought, they'll last as long as I need them to last. If I'm careful. No, not yet. I won't be careful just yet. First, I am going to have a feast. Right here and now, I'm going to cook up a feast and eat until I drop, and then I'll be careful. Well, he went into the food packs once more and selected what he wanted for his feast. A 4-person beef and potato dinner with orange drink for an appetizer and something called a peach whip for dessert. Just add water, it said on the package, and cook for half an hour or so until everything was normal size and done. Well, Brian went to the lake and got water in one of the aluminum pots and came back to the fire. Just that amazed him. To be able to carry water to the fire in a pot? Such a simple act, and he hadn't been able to do it for almost 2 months. And he guessed at the amount and put the beef dinner and peach dessert on to boil, then went back to the lake and brought water to mix with the orange drink. It was sweet and tangy, almost too sweet, but so good that he didn't drink it fast. He held it in his mouth and let the taste go over his tongue, tickling on the sides, sloshing it back and forth, and then down, then swallow, then another. That, he thought, that is just fine. And he got more lake water and mixed another one and drank it fast, then a third one. And he sat with that near the fire, but looking out across the lake, thinking how rich the smell was from the cooking beef dinner. There was garlic in it and some other spices, and the smells came up to him and made him think of home. His mother cooking, the rich smells of the kitchen, and at that precise instant, with his mind full of home and the smell from the food filling him, the plane appeared. He had only a moment of warning. There was a tiny drone, but as before, it didn't register. Then suddenly, roaring over his head low and in back of the ridge, a bush plane with floats fairly exploding into his life. It passed directly over him, very low, tipped a wing sharply over the tail of the crashed plane in the lake, cut power, glided down the long part of the L of the lake, then turned and glided back, touching the water gently once and twice, then settling with the spray to taxi and stop with its floats gently bumping the beach in front of Brian's shelter. He had not moved. It had all happened so fast that he hadn't moved. And he sat with the pot of orange drink still in his hand, staring at the plane, not quite understanding it yet, not quite knowing yet that it was over. Well, the pilot cut the engine and opened the door and got out and balanced and stepped forward on the float to hop into the sand without getting his feet wet. He was wearing sunglasses and he took them off to stare at Brian. I heard your emergency transmitter, and then I saw the plane, and when I came over," and he trailed off and cocked his head, studying Brian. "Damn, you're him, aren't you? You're that kid. Well, they quit looking a month, no, almost 2 months ago. You're him, aren't you? You're the kid." Well, Brian was standing now, but still silent, still holding the drink. His tongue seemed to be stuck to the roof of his mouth, and his throat didn't work right. He looked at the pilot and the plane and down at himself, dirty and ragged, burned and lean and tough, and he coughed to clear his throat. "My name is Brian Robinson," he said. Then he saw that his stew was done, the peach whip almost done, and he waved to it with his hand. "Would you like something to eat?" That's where we stop. So I want you to look at your questions and think about where are you going to write down your evidence. And I'm going to do the same. Got just a few more minutes. All right, so you know you have to do all 4 of these in your journals today, and that's kind of where we're going to end. So we're going to put all 4 in reading journals. And that's it for today. I'll check back with you tomorrow, and then we'll see which ones that you need to upload. Bye, guys.